let's be serious about what's going to happen next year, because we also can see the way the government is planning to set things up for next year. They're saying, all right, we've had a shocker of an end of the year, but they're looking forward to the Fed cutting interest rates next year in the United States, that having flow-on effects here, and being able to claim some sort of victory as competent economic managers. What does the coalition do then to start to provide, not just, hey, we're not the other guy, but alternate policies to say, hey, this is actually going to be a better, more properly reforming government if you give us a chance?
Yeah, absolutely, James. And I think that goes to the heart of the matter. It's why I was part of a group of coalition MPs that went to COP28, not to drink the Kool-Aid, but to attend the Net Zero Nuclear Summit that was being held on the sidelines, and also got to speak to at COP itself around you can save the planet, but not if you starve humanity, and the use of agricultural technology in a low emissions future. So I do think we're very much as shadow ministers working on alternative policies that will solve some of the challenges that our country faces. I think what we've also got to do is disclose the fact that whilst Jim's talking a big game of, paying down that additional fossil fuel taxes onto the budget, they've still kept spending higher than it needs to be. They've still put more money on the budget than they did in May. And I bet come next May, they'll have additional spending again. So the Reserve Bank needs to see the government cutting spending more than they are. And so I'm not completely convinced that we won't see another rate rise next year. And out in middle Australia, they are copping it in the neck from this government. And no matter how many times Jim and other senior ministers run through the list of cost of living relief they've implemented, people just aren't feeling it as their mortgages have gone through the roof, and as, energy prices, food prices and the like. So, we've got to deliver great policies that make sense and that are going to really shift the dial, but we also have to expose this government for the frauds that they are. I mean, very tin ears. You will have seen reports of, the PM over with his $500 bottles of wine this week, while most Australian families in our capital city suburbs are struggling to work out how they're actually going to pay for Christmas. And in my own portfolio area of infrastructure and transport, they're bringing in 1.5 million migrants whilst slashing congestion-busting infrastructure projects across capital cities. And so you've reasonably heard even Labor premiers bagging them out over recent weeks because it just doesn't make sense. So we've got to expose that, and we've got to come up with a credible plan to put before the Australian people within the next 12 months.
Liz?
Bridget, obviously the Labor government is going to go to this break with a deep sigh of relief and hope to resurrect themselves in the second half of their term. Do you guys have any rough idea of what you think they're going to try to do in order to get the Australian public's faith back? Because obviously they're not doing well in the polls at the moment. Albo specifically is suffering in the polls for good reason. What do you think they're going to do to try and resurrect it?
Well, I think it's going to be one of their great Christmas challenges is to how to actually turn the polls around, turn the embedded sense that Albanese and his cabinet is not on the side of the Australian people. We saw that shift when they backed Qantas and Alan Joyce over everyday Australian travellers, wanting just planes that took off and landed at the same time and where you could afford a ticket. We saw it on The Voice, where they stood on the side of elite bankers, sporting heroes, academics on The Voice, and then 60% of Australians said, hang on, we don't think this is the right way to go. So I think they really have to decide whose side they're on, and I think that's going to be quite a difficult internal debate for them, because they're not the working class party that they used to be.
No.
They now represent predominantly affluent people in inner city seats, And working class Australians are seeing on a policy measure, on the economics and on the cultural issues, Australian Labor is no longer in their corner. And I think that's going to be a really, it's almost an existential question for them to debate internally over the summer.
Absolutely. Bridget McKenzie, the 3 I's sums up Labor: ideology, idiocy and incompetence. Bridget McKenzie, Senator Bridget McKenzie, thanks so much for joining us on Outsiders during the year, and we'll see you again next year. Can't wait. Have a very, very Merry Christmas from all your many, many fans. Thanks so much, Bridget.